Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, Trust the Robots, Revamp Your Operations with AI Software for Improved Efficiency. My name is Abby Dean, and I'm the editor of Advantage Business Media's Manufacturing.net, and I will be moderating today's events. Before we get started, I'd first like to thank our sponsor, Works Applications America, who made this event possible. I'd also like to thank our two wonderful speakers and all of you, our audience, for joining us today for part one of this educational two-part webinar. Now, before I introduce our two speakers, I do want to encourage everyone listening in to take full advantage of the interactive nature of this webinar platform. This means you should feel free to submit questions at any time during the presentation by simply typing your question into the corresponding box on your screen. Just a note also, we will be saving all questions for our speakers until the end of the presentation, and we'll do our very best to answer them in the time we have left. And for those of you who have to dash out at any time, we'll also have this webinar up for on-demand viewing starting tomorrow at manufacturing.net. But business aside, let's go to the main reason you're all here today, our speakers. First, it is my pleasure to introduce the President of Works Applications America, Mr. Tominaga. Prior to joining Works Applications, Mr. Tominaga was the former Vice President at SAP Japan and IBM Japan. Through these various leadership positions, he's cultivated a wealth of knowledge related to ERP software management and implementation for large manufacturers on a global scale. Our second speaker today is Andy Berg, the Editorial Director of Advantage Business Media's Manufacturing Group. Before assuming his current position, Andy was the Executive Editor of Wireless Week and CED Magazine, where he managed the editorial direction for both brands, in addition to co-hosting the Smartwatch video series. Andy also regularly moderates conference panels and webinars, like this one for instance, with industry executives. And now that I've made these introductions, I'm going to hand things over to Andy to start. So Andy, take it away.
Thank you very much, Abby. I appreciate it. So before we get rolling here, I just want to say that Abby is an expert in the industry as well. And Abby, I want you to feel free to jump in at any point during the presentation. I think she has a lot to offer as well. As we get started here, the name of the game today is really change, and as frustrating as that might be, it's also inevitable, especially in today's market. And that change really necessitates innovation to really keep pace with the market, but also to sustain current growth rates and just to stay ahead of the pack. I think there's a lot of confusion, which usually comes naturally with change. That's around all the terms that are thrown around in the industry, from automation, AI, artificial intelligence. We've got robotics. There's the IoT. A number of terms that while a company might have started out with the M2M and embedding sensors, now they're looking at, well, what does IoT mean? What's the next step? What am I supposed to do with my legacy systems? And that's really what we're trying to present in this series is what's the next step, and how can you use these new tools to your benefit? So I think the key word aside from change is also disruption, and it's a digital disruption, and it's really about what kinds of solutions are out there, how are they going, what are the benefits of those solutions, and what are the challenges as you present those to your entire company. While there are definitely pros and cons to upgrading your existing systems, it is a necessity that manufacturers start looking into these kinds of new solutions that are out there if they're going to remain competitive. And it's also about, as I said before, following where the market is. Whether they know it or not, most businesses have now been affected by this digital disruption in one way or another. Whether that's because they've been forced to upgrade their own ERP systems, or in the case that they're not aware, it could be because the competition has upgraded and is now beating them to the punch. So it's sort of an indirect way that they're being. As I said before, this hits on so many levels and has been called by so many different names or so many different areas. Originally we thought of M2M, which involved implementing sensors. We moved to, there's IoT, which involves big data and analytics and really processing all that information. And then you have some people are today calling this, if you take everything as one, the fourth industrial revolution, the third being lean manufacturing, or Industry 4.0, you might have heard it called that. But no matter what you call it, this new set of tools are evolving, and they can help streamline your business, drive efficiencies on any number of levels, and ultimately help a company sustain healthy growth over time. It's important to note that companies are all over the board in terms of where they are in implementation. Some jumped in head first, others might still be waiting in the wings. There's the larger companies that could afford it might have jumped in first thing, but not really had a plan or known really what they were doing. They just had the budget to do it. Some of the smaller and mid-sized manufacturers might still be getting up to speed, which is fair. There's a lot to consider, and I think we're at the point now where, depending on what your needs are, it's a good time to start looking at this, and we'll talk more about that. So what is so disruptive about all this technology? As I said before, this touches on every part of the business as well as customer expectations. It's a huge change, and nobody is going to tell you that this is an easy move to make. You're talking about a monumental shift in the way industry does business across the board. There's a huge learning curve associated with implementing these types of technologies, and there is also a cost. But the real question there is whether you can afford not to start implementing these kinds of solutions. Whether you're upgrading your legacy systems through software or completely replacing your hardware, as I said, there is a cost, but the cost of not doing so is probably greater, especially if your competition is already on top of it. So I think one of the reasons that this is so disruptive is that you have a consumer side that has been changing the way we think about technology in our personal lives, and has created seamless experiences, whether you're buying off Amazon or you're any way that any app that you have on your phone. When people go to work and they use technology, they're now expecting that technology to work the same way, seamlessly, and that's really changing the B2B expectations as to how this all works. Bottom line, though, is that as adoption grows, customers are going to expect this, and when they're let down, your company could be leaving money on the table. One example, HP makes inkjet printers. And they now have, because most of their printers are connected to the internet, they now have something that alerts the company that you might be low on ink and automatically will send you ink through a subscription service every so often. So right there you have an example of how disruptive that is to that particular industry. And when you consider how much revenue companies like HP make off of the ink alone, you can start to understand how this kind of technology is really disrupting the entire industry.
Andy, I might jump in real quick and make a point.
Yeah, please do, Abby. Sure.
Okay. And I'm just saying this too because I hear from so many manufacturers day to day on our website about trying to grapple with this. And I think the other thing that's really important to note here, and that Andy already mentioned once, is that there's no guidebook necessarily for how to do this for every manufacturing company. You know, that's one of the reasons it's so disruptive. Every company, every main driver of change is going to be different given that specific manufacturing context and that company and how they do business and where they want to grow. So everyone who's feeling confused out there, you have every right to feel confused or overwhelmed because it's overwhelming. That being said, and Andy said this as well, and I know Mr. Tominaga is going to jump in on this later too, it's really about taking these first steps and not just growing your awareness about this kind of overall context that's shaping the industry, but then what also comes into play, and I think what Andy is going to go to next, is what you can do about it now, aside from writing big checks or doing something that you're not comfortable with. So to say, everyone should be overwhelmed. It's overwhelming, but we are here to help. I mean, disruption is in and of itself disruptive. So yeah, I just wanted to add that one point that's why it's so confusing too, is because every company and every driver of growth for those industries are different. So I will let Andy continue, but I just wanted to jump in there real quick.
No, thank you. That's a good point, Abby. Is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution here, and everyone's needs are going to be different. And that brings up a good point too, Abby, is that really identifying your needs as you proceed on this road is very important. That's something we'll return to again and again in this series. So again, there are a lot of solutions, but there's also the confusion of what are they. I mean, one of the main areas of focus in this series is AI, and I think there's some confusion. What does that mean for a manufacturer that's maybe upgrading with software their ERP system? We're not talking about Siri or Alexa. We're talking about, and this is something that Mr. Tominaga is going to dive into deeper, so I won't go too deep, but there are some misconceptions around this technology that adds to that confusion. There's things that are going to touch all aspects of your business, whether you're talking about, as we said, software that upgrades to your ERP system to include analytics and big data, so you're really able to identify and get some insights around parts of your business that maybe you didn't even know there was waste or inefficiencies there. These kinds of systems allow for a level of predictability and visibility across the organization that is absolutely essential in today's market. And really that is the cutting edge. That's what's giving some of the competition a leg up. For example, if your sales team can see everything they need in terms of pricing and availability, whether they're in Shanghai or Chicago, if they have that information right there on their smartphone, and they have accurate quoting information, I mean, I guarantee you that person is going to get the sale over the rep that maybe has to say, let me get back to you on that. It'll maybe take me a couple of days. And that really is where I think a lot of companies are leaving some of the money on the table. But that's just one example of the kinds of insights that these types of solutions offer. So the right ERP system means improved visibility. That's one of the things, and it's a real-time, centralized in the cloud, available to every employee, whether they're on the plant floor or C-level executive in an office. This results in pricing info for sales, visibility of the supply chain, automation of routine tasks like invoice entry, something as small as invoice entry, reduction of errors and downtime, And there are these outlying results as well, like employee retention and customer retention and stickiness. You know, one of predictive maintenance is one of the things that is resulting in inefficiencies that are significant in terms of the bottom line. Abby, anything to add here?
Yeah, I would just add that predictive word. That word predictive is really at the heart of why this is sweeping the industry. You know, for manufacturers, it's about how can I get my product to market faster? How can I make my customers happier? Can I do it all at a lower price point? And when you're thinking about how to do that, if there's a software system in place where, again, the AI is the predictive part, guys, where that can help you get to those points, even using existing historical data that has been the same for years, that's wonderful. I mean, that's literally just taking everything you're doing now and fine-tuning it with a software program. And that's one of the reasons when we talk about Industry 4.0 and sort of modernizing your business and implementing smarter operations, software is a really good entry point exactly because of that. It takes what you already have, including your legacy equipment, your legacy operations, and it just kind of helps you find the little nuggets and data that you didn't even know were there. And that's part of this visibility. As Andy said, it's not just visibility whether you're in Shanghai or Chicago or across different plants or continents or what have you. It's this visibility all around, simplifying routine tasks. I mean, think about data entry. Think about if you're in the HR department or the accounting department. How many errors happen just because someone entered the wrong number or mistyped something, and that just happens over time. I mean, that's just, we're humans, that's what happens. But when you're adding in the predictive element, again, that word predictive, where you're not utilizing, you're not leaving it up to just humans doing the same tasks every day, which is also monotonous and maybe not the best use of their time as well. That's another component.
Sure.
The software can do it for you. And I mean, that's really invaluable just
right.
in terms of reducing those small errors, and anything that's going to cut into your ROI is just no good.
Sure. and which isn't to say that, you know, you're not going to have a hardware upgrade at some point, but I think to your point,
right.
Abby, is that, you know, a software solution might be the right start to ramp into this and really start realizing some of the benefits, you know, but yes, and I think that's one of the things that this series is going to continue to stress, is that this is not a one and done type of solution. It's an evolving thing. Technology is just that way, and it's going to grow in parallel with your business.
Right, exactly. And, you know, manufacturers, that's what we do, right? You guys figure out how to do something better, cheaper, and faster, and, you know, we go from there. So it's just another form of innovation. It's, like Andy said, it's moving from the kind of lean movement that took over to this kind of new digital phase. Anyway, I will let Andy continue, but yes, all very good points.
All right. So we'll talk a lot about the pros throughout this series, and we'll get more in depth, and this is really just kind of a high-level look at what we're talking about. And then there are cons, which are not insignificant, but are also need to be weighed against whether or not you can continue to compete without having invested in these types of solutions. So pros, I mean, we've talked about them: visibility, flexibility, improved efficiency, that high level of predictability, which, you know, I think some of these solutions might even surprise you know, those that have just implemented them as to some of the insights they gain because there is, the software is that powerful that it can pick out things that otherwise you have just overlooked. And obviously, there's the competitive edge, and it's a long-term strategy, something that's you're going to evolve along with your business. The cons, and these are things that we'll talk about in part 2 of the series more. Cost, obviously, everyone needs to look at the ROI up front. Can it be proven out? Is it right for us? What is right for us? Implementing these solutions can be time-consuming. There's training of employees. There's auditing the company, ensuring that you're getting the solutions that you need for your particular needs, which, again, we said, there's no one-size-fits-all. And the disrupted part can come in and rear its ugly head as the learning curve continues in training employees and ensuring that they're adopting the technology. And there's always uncertainty with technology. There's always the bug that needs to be worked out, the calls to support to ensure that this is working right or this isn't working right, or But in the end, I think the mantra here is that can you afford not to, and that change necessitates innovation. And the rest of the industry is doing it. There's no turning back. I think the Luddites have lost on this one, and we're squarely in Industry 4.0 at this point. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Abby and then to Mr. Tominaga for a really interesting take on the history of AI and what that means for manufacturing.
Yeah, and I don't really have much to add here. I just really want to emphasize what Andy said here and what part of this quote is. And again, this quote is this quote is from a white paper that Manufacturing.net wrote in conjunction with Works Applications America, which you guys should download later, by the way. Super great. But it's about the willingness to innovate. So money is a concern. Everyone has a budget, of course. ROI is pivotal no matter what. This is a business. However, all we ask, at least for right now, and we'll go further into this in our second series on this topic, but having that willingness to innovate and even just be here and kind of feel out what's going on in the industry is really important. And yeah, I'll leave it there because I want to hear from Mr. Tominaga. So with that, I will turn it over to him to start his presentation.
Well, thank you, Andy. Today, I'd like to have a session on transforming ERP with AI. Before going in, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mitz Tominaga. I'm the President, Works Application America. A little bit about myself, former Vice President with SAP Japan and also IBM Japan. I have 30 years of IT experience, and within that, I have concentrated especially on ERP. I have also worked extensively on large-scale global manufacturing ERP implementation. On today's subject, I'd like to explain what is artificial intelligence, a little bit about the history and trends of ERP, and how does this new technology, AI and ERP, integrate. A lot of us, when we imagine AI, we look at some of these pictures, robotics and so forth. We call this generic AI, but this may take a little bit of a while to be in practical terms. Today, I'd like to focus on something called machine data, which is a very practical part of AI used in the business world. The characteristics is finding patterns from past data and quickly processing tasks. A lot of you probably use something like Siri or Alexa, where you ask today's weather or ask to download a music. There's a lot of things that is going on behind the scene, which is algorithm and neural network, that will make this possible. I'd like to give a business example so that you have better understanding of this model. One of the early adopters of this model is Elliptic Corporation. They are a deep learning corporation to make doctors faster and more accurate. There's approximately 300 X-ray images captured in U.S. every year. And doctors make medical decisions, but at the same time, there's approximately 12,000 different ways possible medical diagnosis. So doctors obviously have a very difficult job. But with machine learning, once you take the X-ray, it compares with other historical data, what has been done on treatment, and provide the best possible way to treat the client. And this has helped doctors make more accurate decisions a lot faster. And the detection rate, such as lung cancer, has been over 93%, which is higher than the average doctor diagnosis. The technology is now used in early detection, treatment planning, and disease monitoring. The other example I'd like to add is Google Translator. I myself from Japan used to use quite a bit, but 10 years ago, it was something that was not practical. But just last week, when I went back to Japan, this was used quite often. For example, a lot of people outside of Japan coming to Japan from the United States and Europe, when they go to a hotel, they carry an iPhone or iPad, and then it captured the language, and the hotel concierge was able to provide directions and where to go. And now it is very common use in Japan at this moment. The other area that I'd like to mention is area of financial industry, very sophisticated stock traders. In 2000, there were 600 stockbrokers in Goldman Sachs. Unbelievably, there's only 2 right now. But instead, 200 computer engineers operating AI-powered automated trading program is taking place. So based on historical data, Twitter's trends, they're making more computerized logical trading. I hope you have some understanding of this AI machine learning in the business cases. Now I'd like to get into ERP. Some of you use ERP extensively, especially in the manufacturing corporations. ERP boomed around year 2000 with the companies such as SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft. The reason it boomed, one was for globalization. Manufacturing companies, distribution companies had to work on a global scale in order to capture market early, but also to reduce cost. So some of the manufacturing operation was outside of, let's say, United States, Japan, and so forth, to a cheaper place. Or back office call center now are in India. But in order to have an integrated system so that executives could tell which area is selling what product, where the inventory is at, what kind of manufacturing speed we are operating at, it is very critical that the company had one database ERP system. And therefore, a lot of corporations incorporated this when the internet and ERP technology took place. At the same time, ERP was a record of transactions, meaning that it had to have reliability on the data. It had to be available because you can't stop order entry or manufacturing during the day. And it had to have good security. So those are the key focus of an ERP system. It was also an executive system where top management could look at the data real time and with accuracy. But people on the field who is entering data, searching data, making reports were not necessarily the happiest people using ERP because it lacked creativity, it lacked suggestion, it lacked usability. And now, for the first time, this is changing. The new technology is open source tools. Previously, all ERP had one database, whether Oracle, SQL, relational database. And it had limited capacity for storage. It was also expensive. With the new technology with cloud, now the data storage is indefinite. And also, could be done in a lot cheaper cost. Also, the new technology, as mentioned here, is used on systems such as Amazon, Facebook, and Google. As all you have experienced, Amazon, Facebook, Google has real fast response time, where your accounting system, the more data you have, it sometimes slows down. But with the new technology, you could store more data with faster speed. And this is changing the ERP systems. What can we see in the future? One is reducing routine tasks. If you look at a typical accounting personnel, HR personnel, and so forth, 40% of the time they are inputting necessary data. And then the rest of the time they're editing, they're searching, and so forth. This could be reduced dramatically with AI technology. The other area is the system will be able to provide suggestions based on what you have done before and what has been successful within your operation. And this was not available in any other system in the ERP before. And for the future, forecasting behavior that was more in the area of human analytics and so forth is now something that AI could support the decision maker. This is a study done where an average accounting personnel spends his day. So he will spend 40% of the time inputting, and then the rest of the 40% doing editing, search, and share. The more important communication, brainstorming, and decision making is probably 20 or 30% of the time. What the new ERP system with AI will do will dramatically reduce this routine task so that your employees could have a better understanding or have suggestions and make faster decisions. Let me give you some example of this. One example is invoice or resume entry. Currently, with most of the ERP system, the person has to enter invoice information or resume information or whatever information all the time. Of course, there's error, and there's not much learning in the process. What the technology first will do with the OCR technology, it will read invoices and resume automatically. It will also map the data into your ERP system, once again, automatically. If there's an error or if there's a place where the system doesn't understand where to put it, it will give you, for example, in this screen, a red or orange signal. Once you tell the system that this field will belong to, let's say, a common area, the next time the system reads a similar invoice or resume, it will learn and it will put it in the right place. And as you have more data and more transactions, the system will become smarter and smarter, and also it will become faster and faster. So this is one of the areas that people could reduce input and so forth. And this is happening with the new ERP system today. The other area that I like to mention is the area of suggestions. For example, if you have a new need for a job, you're opening a new operation or branch in Brazil, and you need an operation manager. Previously, you look at in Brazil who will qualify based on his experience, succession planning, and so forth. Or look at United States, Europe, and other countries for possible candidates. But if you have a database, and also if you could know what are the successful candidates of this operation, the system could study and say, for example, a salesperson that was working in Europe had a successful job done in a previous example. Then the system will learn that and provide rankings of each of the personnel that might be possible for the better job. So these are the things that the system will suggest, and so that managers can make a faster and more intelligent decision. And these kind of examples are coming in more and more. And as there's going to be more examples and cases coming in, there's machine learning that will come with a better and stronger ERP. Lastly, the concept of this is as you have a very intelligent personal assistant. Each and every one of them will have a very smart person that will do or use your routine work and provide suggestions. And I think this is quite different from the previous ERP that we have been experienced. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I would like to pass it over to Abby Dean.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Tominaga, and thanks to you too, Andy, for your really insightful presentation. Before we head over to our questions, I first want to thank, again, Works Applications America, who made this event possible. Also, as a reminder to our audience, you can still submit questions by typing them into the corresponding box on your screen. Again, we'll do our very best to answer them all in the time we have left. Okay, now on to our questions round. Mr. Tominaga, I'm going to start with you. You did a really wonderful and thorough job breaking down the evolution of ERP as well as the role of artificial intelligence and big data. Keeping that kind of history and timeline in mind, I'm wondering what you think we can expect as this technology advances further.
Sure. As the technology advances, currently the data is most likely limited within the corporation. So historical data, transactional data, operation data captured within the organization. But as the technology advances, I think more and more data and connectivity with outside data is going to be possible, such as getting information from Twitter, LinkedIn, and so forth. Public data could be combined with operational data within the corporation, which will provide more historical data and then give more better suggestion for management decision. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have another question that I think really relates to that, so I'm going to skip over Andy and just go again to you, Mr. Tominaga. You spoke really well about some of the benefits of ERP, and I'm wondering if you could maybe dive a little deeper into that and talk to our manufacturers who are listening. What are some of the other benefits of using a next-generation ERP system?
Sure. One of the things that I'd like to mention, which I have mentioned in AI, machine learning, but the other advantage that is very practical is the cloud technology, which will have financial impact to most operations. For example, the cloud ERP now instead of traditional on-premise implementation, you will have a lot less cost upfront. Let me dive in a little bit more. Previous on-premise, you have to buy the license upfront. You have to buy the system apart, and you also have to make sure the infrastructure is in place, and that could be substantial investment. Where the cloud-based is going to be subscription-based, so as you barrier to entry is lower, and as your business grows, then you'll subscribe more, and as your business slows down or you exit in one market or country, then the number will reduce. So instead of fixed cost, the subscription model will be able to be flexible as your business grows or as you exit the business. So the barrier of entry is a lot lower. The other thing I like to mention is the upgrades. A lot of version upgrades cost a lot of money on implementation for traditional ERP, where with the cloud-based, everybody pretty much uses the same application, and it's done mostly outside of people understanding, just like iPhone or whatever. So I think the upgrade stress for the cooperation is a lot less. And that is, I believe, is a very tangible and realistic cost saving for most of the companies. Thank you.
So now I want to move on to a question for you, Andy. And this question is, so this comes from Kent Drake. He asks, is this too expensive for small companies? And I want you to answer that, but then I also kind of would really love to dig into how would you get started? So if you could address the cost and then the kind of beginning steps for those thinking about adoption, that would be great.
Sure. What we said earlier in the presentation was that there's no one-size-fits-all, and it really depends on what you want to do and what your needs are. And that's why it's so important to plan and kind of ensure that you're targeting solutions that are specific to your enterprise. So really the first part of this is going to be to go through your existing systems, look at what's not working, audit your business, and auditing your without having data that supports your decision. So you really want to look at where you think efficiencies could be made, and you can really make the business case for this kind of purchase. That's going to involve I guess the main points there are going to be that it drives sustained growth, and you're going to be able to use those data-driven analytics and really have a plan for evolving the system from the get-go. I mean, would you agree with that, Abby?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, and this goes back to the first part of the question, the cost. I think the cost is going to be automatically just higher for a smaller company,
right?
Because it's a new cloud ERP system, but also you have to weigh that against the cost of a new on-premise ERP system. So again, it depends on the company and what they're going for, their direction, but yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you said as far as the kind of first steps companies should take. And
again, it's probably worth stressing too that a software solution is going to be less expensive than ripping out that old hardware and replacing that as well. So good to look at the software side of things first once you've done your audit and really looked at what your needs are. And see if there's a solution that maybe is plug-and-play friendly with your existing hardware.
Right. And that kind of gets into my next question, which fits in very well. Does moving to a more modern ERP system necessarily mean tossing out your expensive legacy equipment? And Andy, I'll direct that one to you as well.
Sure, and not necessarily at all. That's why it's something to consider when you're shopping around. With a lot of these solutions, it's an addendum to existing systems, and that's why it's a good jumping off point to sort of, it's simply a transition to the next step. And again, and this is something you'll hear again and again in this series, is that this is not a one-and-done investment. You're going to need software and systems that continue to evolve with the business and as changes to the market come up. So something that you're going to want to be monitoring the whole way along. And a lot of times I think you're also going to want to, when you're shopping around for a system, you're going to want to be talking to a number of different vendors to ensure that maybe they play nice with your existing hardware if that's the direction you want to go.
Right. And when shopping around too, I think the other thing people or manufacturers should really consider is, again, something that you talked about in your presentation, Andy, which is this idea of visibility. What's going to help our entire company? What's the entire enterprise going to benefit from? So I'm wondering also, and I know I'm picking on you because I'm asking you all these questions now,
No.
but I wonder if visibility is a company's biggest problem right now, if they're finding they're a little spread too thin, do you think a next generation ERP software system could really help fix that?
Absolutely. And a lot of that, some enterprises might find that maybe they haven't moved to the cloud, but that more modern ERP system is going to give you that centralized, real-time look at all aspects of your operation, and that's always a good thing. When everybody on board, whether you're talking, again, it's the whole globalization thing, but whether you're talking about an office in Shanghai or, that's awake at 2 a.m. Or somebody in Chicago, 2 p.m. the previous day, but that they all have the same information, and that's all up to date, and it's going to give those salespeople or whoever, and for whatever need it may be, is going to see that information, the same information that's going to be accurate and up to date.
Right, and Mr. Tominaga did a really wonderful job of talking about how artificial intelligence kind of fits into this ERP system and what this means
Right.
for manufacturers. And I just want to take a moment again to really emphasize to everyone listening in the audience that AI predictability factor is what's really key and essential here. And that's, again, I know we said this earlier and we keep coming back to it, but that's really, you're paying for that predictability. Nothing feels worse for a manufacturer than when you have to stop production or something, there's some kind of downtime or some sort of error. Using artificial intelligence and putting that into your ERP system, that really helps to avoid those sorts of errors. So I just wanted to kind of take a second to really hit on that as well, because I think Mr. Tominaga did a really good job. I just want to hit again on the fact that predictability is so important.
Absolutely. Anytime you can.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, anytime you can identify the problem before it happens, and that eliminates that downtime. I mean, how many cases is that going to pay for itself? So.
Exactly. And then Andy, we probably just have time for one more question. So I'm gonna direct this to you. Do you think it's too late for companies to, if they haven't implemented smarter solutions, do you think they've sort of missed the boat, or what advice would you give them?
No, not at all. And I, this goes back to that idea of change necessitates innovation. I think this is a situation where, maybe the larger manufacturers have jumped in right away, but I'm guessing that they're they're adjusting those processes along the way because they have the budget to do it. But now is the time. Certainly waiting is not advised, but really getting into that first step, I think, is key, and understanding which solutions are going to address the needs of your business, because you don't want to do technology just for technology's sake, and that's where you run into a waste of your investment. But no, definitely not too late. And technology is always evolving, so wherever you get in, you're going to have to continue to change with that technology no matter what. So now is the time.
Absolutely, and like we've all said through this entire presentation, it's really just about starting and asking those fundamental questions of your own enterprise. What do we think we can do better? How do we think we can do it? And what data do we need to make this sort of decision to invest? And yeah, I don't want to get too much into everything else because that's what part 2 is, but yeah, I think this really wraps up today's conversation. We've covered so much material. Again, the title of this webinar is Trust the Robots, Revamp Your Operations with AI Software for Improved Efficiency. Thanks so much to everyone in the audience for those great questions. And of course, thank you so much, Mr. Tominaga and Andy, for your insightful answers. If you would like to take another look, yeah, of course. If you'd like to take another look at this webinar or share it with a colleague, it will be available for on-demand viewing at manufacturing.net starting tomorrow. Also, again, today's webinar was the first in a 2-part series sponsored by Works Applications America. In the second webinar, we'll be taking an even deeper dive into how AI-enabled ERP software can help manufacturers really manage the disruption brought about by Industry 4.0. Specifically, we're also going to look at how it can transform anything from your HR to your accounting department. So definitely be on the lookout for that in the coming weeks. Additionally, guys, if you're interested in learning more about some of the topics we discussed today, then I'd really recommend downloading our latest white paper, written also in conjunction with Works Applications America, called Embrace the Disruption, Revamp Your Operations with Artificial Intelligence for Improved Efficiency and Growth. And if that title sounds familiar to you, that's because it is really similar to the title of today's webinar, which was on purpose. We wrote this as a supplement to the webinar today, so we really hope you download that free report on manufacturing.net and learn more about this really interesting and this deep topic. That aside, this really concludes today's presentation. Thank you so much to everyone in attendance for tuning in. Thanks again to our really excellent speakers, Mr. Tominaga and Andy Berg. And of course, a thank you to our sponsor, Works Applications America. Everyone have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll look forward to seeing you in part 2 of this webinar series.